Namibia is one of the largest and driest countries in sub-Saharan Africa, with vast beaches, desert, wetlands and bushveld vegetation. The climate in the country ranges from arid temperatures and water scarcity to unexpected and varied rainfall patterns. The weather is hot and dry, with sporadic and irregular rains. A quarter of the country's population relies on subsistence agriculture and herding, meaning the increased droughts and drop in precipitation caused by climate change has had an adverse effect on the food security of many Namibians. Namibia's rural populations, as well as the disadvantaged throughout the country, are the most exposed to climate change's harmful effects. This is due to the fact that these vulnerable populations' ability to adapt to the harmful effects of climate change on agricultural practices is low. The CRAVE project aims to reduce rural human vulnerability and food insecurity in the face of climate risks and threats by improving the adaptive capacity, well-being, and resilience of vulnerable small-scale farming communities in crop production landscapes threatened by climate change. The Zambezi, Kavango West, and Kavango East are the focus regions of the project, with demonstration sites being set up in these regions, with solar water pumps and micro-drip irrigation systems being installed at these sites to improve cropping practices and increase productivity. Socially, the project supported 1,793 beneficiaries and impacted thousands more in terms of quality of education, health and security. Increased crop sales and seasonal jobs developed during harvesting and planting periods enhanced the livelihoods of inhabitants of the three communities. Women were trained, and women make up 67% of the beneficiaries. The prevalence of drought has been on the rise in Namibia for the past few years in all regions of the country. This makes initiatives such as the CRAVE project crucial for the welfare of the Namibian people as well as their environment.
Namibia, as a developing state, is really one of the countries that are really impacted by the impact of climate change, and this is really seen more at the ground level in the communities that we are supporting, especially the poorest of the poorer communities are the ones that are mainly impacted by the impact of climate change. We feel that they need to be capacitated for them to build their resilience to the impact of climate change, and we need to do that by making sure that at least the knowledge that they have now needs to be elevated to a level that they can stand by themselves.
Look, Anna, when we're talking about climate change, it's a complicated subject. It just not only impact on one sector. It needs a multi-sectoral approach, training farmers on how to implement conservation agricultural practice, which is more climate friendly in terms of cropping and cultivation. Secondly, is diversifying livelihoods of those communities, beyond just utilizing rain-fed cultivations practices. We've expanded it to irrigation systems so that communities and small-scale farmers, they produce food and crops throughout the year.
Okay, yeah, the CRAVE project it's a project that basically focuses on crop growing regions. As we know, Namibia is largely a livestock farming country, but in crop growing countries, regions, the project seeks to introduce a way of production that is adapted to the impacts of climate change by basically building the resilience of the small scale producers, both horticultural as well as dry land, to basically produce for household and also to graduate gradually from subsistence farming to producing for the market. On dry land, it's mostly grains, as we know. It's your pearl millet that we classically call mahangu, and your maize. And then under horticulture, under irrigation, it's mostly the legumes, the vegetables, your cabbage, your root crops, your tomatoes, your carrots, and your spinach and your in some cases also your green salads.
The project is implemented in such a way that all identified needs have been made available to the targeted farmers. Appropriate implements for minimum tillage, drought-tolerant seed varieties, organic manure for soil restoration, trainings, solar energy technologies such as solar water pumps, micro-drip irrigation, and water harvest and conservation technologies such as water cocoon have all been identified and made available to farmers to date.
We've bought tractors, around 1830 odd tractors that for the mechanization drive. And this is mostly for reaping services, not plowing, because now this conservation agriculture, minimum soil disturbance. Provision of quality seeds has also been very good and directly linked to the yield and production, or if I can call it the successful harvest in many cases, because quality seeds lead to quality produce.
When we do the selection for the farmers, there are criteria that we look at in terms of water provision for the farmer. So we have farmers that already having water along the river, but we have farmers that are away from the rivers, but they have water access underground. So they're using underground water resources to supplement their crop production. Let me start with horticulture. Within the horticulture, we have two support groups. One is individual, small-scale horticulture farmers. The other ones are more demonstration sites, where we have farmers that are linked to those demonstration sites, so they are more in a group. So it's ranging between 10 and 20 farmers that are working within that specific demonstration site.
To ensure that the objectives of the projects would be achieved, the project conducted beneficiary inventory assessment to identify the needs for both horticulture and rain-fed farmers, identified options to adapt to climate change, and evaluated the options in terms of criteria availability, benefits, costs, effectiveness and efficiency, and feasibility complemented the inventory.
We are targeting the most vulnerable communities, in terms of climate change. Those with very, very low level of capital or means to implementation in terms of access to capital. In other words, these communities are unbankable to the formal financial sectors. As such, they rely mainly on natural resource use for their livelihoods and everyday survival. So we have engaged them. We've created awareness of the form of funding that we are pursuing, that we are deploying to them, and aware that it's grant funding, it's not something that is repairable. But we're also very particular in informing them that we are going to only select those communities with a sense of ownership and accountability.
If you don't have the capacity as a person or as an individual, you're poor, you don't have assets, you don't have technologies, you don't have resources to buy or to get tools or technologies or get techniques that you need for you to be able to improve your current environment, then you are already vulnerable.
We had to be clear from the onset that the responsibility of maintaining appropriate utilization of those equipment, the funding, etc., is lying with the beneficiaries themselves, and they need to demonstrate that so that we continue to support them.
More farmers will receive enhanced training to help them transition from their present land preparation practices to more sustainable ones. These efforts encourage farmers to transition from subsistence to commercial farming.
The knowledge that we are looking at is first, it's a different level. Yes, we are then supporting the institutions such as the Ministry of Agriculture, which is the implementing entities for the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia. So as a project, we are just facilitating and coordinating the activities, but the implementation of the project is governed by the stakeholders on the ground.
We identify, for example, research institutions, the University of Namibia, and NAST, bringing in academic knowledge, and turning that academic knowledge into practice at a local level. We also work with the Mashare Development, Agricultural Center, mainly to provide a conducive environment for learning, to improve knowledge and skills for farmers, and also for outreach and technicians within the Ministry of Agriculture. So you can already tell that it's a multi-stakeholder participation project. So we brought in insurance company to see how do they devise instrument for crop insurance schemes to cover those vulnerable communities. So we brought in other development partners such as KfW to co-finance the activities on the ground with the intention to broaden the scope of implementation.
The highlight of the CRAVE project is the Mashare Agricultural Development Institute, and it was officially opened by Okavango East Governor Bonifacius Wakudumo. The community members welcomed the initiative with both hands and received the infrastructure and equipment with open hearts.
My office would like to see the center regaining its position as a center of excellence that will support the transformation of the Kavango East region from one of the poorest regions in the country to a fully agricultural production region that creates wealth to the people of Kavango East region in particular, and Namibia in general. I cannot understand nor accept why this region has to be one of the poorest while we have water and land in abundance. Ladies and gentlemen, this center should be more relevant, efficient, effective, and sustainable. Hence, we call it a research center.
In terms of economic co-benefits, the project created over 500 jobs during the reporting period through the renovation of the Mashare Agricultural Development Institute, MADI, the establishment of demonstration sites, and tractor operation for reaping services.
The Environmental Investment Fund, through the Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform, by then Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Forestry, introduced the climate resilient agriculture in 3 of the vulnerable extreme northern crop growing regions, CRAVE project, during its regional inception workshop held in Rundu, Kavango East region on the 14th of December 2017. This project is funded by the Green Climate Fund, or GCF, via the Environmental Investment Fund as an accredited agency with more than 70% of the Namibian population depending on agriculture sector for their livelihoods. It is imperative that efforts are made to help in ensuring that Namibian producers in the agriculture sector adapt to new climatic conditions and become resilient to any further change in climate. I'm standing here today on the invitation to hand over to you, 1, the MADI upgraded infrastructure, that is the kitchen and hostel, and a 125.4 kilowatt solar energy technology system, 6-hectare drip irrigation systems, 35 tractors and reapers, with the Kavango East region receiving 12 tractors and reapers. Thank you. These are assets, and they are expected to contribute towards achievements of objectives I indicated earlier on.
Renovation and refurbishment of the kitchen and hostel, as well as the installation of the 125.4 kilowatt plant at Mashare Agricultural Development Institute, was completed and officially handed over to the community, which was jubilant at the unveiling of the new hostels and kitchen.
This facility here, the solar technology system, is going to help in two ways, mainly. Could be many others. First of all, it will reduce the carbon footprint, because we are using. Also, it's going to reduce the cost of operations on the project, because right now the bill of power and water in Namibia generally is very high. So now, on behalf of the minister again and together with the Honorable Governor, we want to officially launch this system here so that it can contribute to the operations of the center. So we can. On behalf of Honorable Minister, thank you. The keys to the entrance of the system.
On behalf of the Kavango East Regional Inhabitants in Namibia in general, I received the keys to these facilities.
The availability of water bodies in these regions made it possible for the CRAVE project to implement the installation of solar water pumps, which connected 163 small-scale farmers to an effective irrigation system.
Demonstration sites are our production sites. In fact, we call them our learning sites. Here we train farmers on how to plant, how to improve the soils, using organic fertilizers, using improved like reapers to be able to improve the soils. We have then 9 demonstration sites across the 3 regions. These are production sites that we are using to demonstrate the sustainable cropping practices and climate smart agriculture, but also demonstrating the technologies that are used to improve the conservation or improve the soil fertility, but also improving the water conservation aspect under climate resilient agriculture, of which we will then have a training component of a 2 area where we'll then build structures that will help in terms of training, in terms of producing, harvesting, storage, as well as adding value in terms of processing of the produce that has been harvested within the demonstration site, but also used by nearby adjacent farmers that are linked to that specific demonstration site. We have then a component of horticulture, which is normally 4 hectares, that is under horticulture production, where we'll then provide a water tank, an irrigation system that will then have a water tank. It will have the drip line, micro drip lines, specifically micro drip irrigation, because they are more water efficient and they help us to at least use water more efficiently depending on the crop water requirements. Then we'll then have a solar water pump. This is a component of the project looking at the core benefit of mitigation, where we are saying how do we improve the productions of the community, but also at the same time using energy efficiency technologies to at least reduce the carbon emissions.
Implementation of this training allow for these themes to be generated through theoretical training and on-the-field practices. The training also focused on gender mainstreaming to encourage a more equal number of men and women farmers in the project cycle. The regional trainings improved the gender mainstreaming of regional-based stakeholders and beneficiaries on project activities.
So at the end of the day, this is quite an activity that we contribute now to one of the project objectives, which is capacitating of the farmers in agricultural activities. So this was more on horticulture. I know they were also kind of sharing some of the information with the farmers that we visited this side of which these farmers, maybe they can also take it as an opportunity. Some of these challenges that we have not experienced in Umsate region or Oshkoto region or Kavango East, where they traveled through.
So I think the most important thing is to know what variety and also the season. And if you can look at it, we also put in sweet potatoes because we know it's our bank that we need to use in terms of our cash flow for the winter time, because you cannot plant them in winter. So it's actually something that we have pre-planned so that we can get something in the winter time. The most important thing is to know your target market, who to give, especially when you plant, because it's not just a matter of planting and then we will see what the heavens will provide at the end of the day. But it requires a proper planning, especially with horticulture, where you are dealing with perishable products. You cannot just be caught your pens down that you don't know where to sell your tomatoes. Basically say, this group, it shows from the questions that they ask, it really shows, yes, they have got a lot of energy. They are very, very zealous. They want to learn a lot of new things. So I just hope from whatever they got from here, they will try by all means and implement. And the most important thing is there are no shortcuts to this kind of business.
The success of the training offered has been demonstrated through the farmers' increased productivity and higher crop yields. Additionally, horticultural producers are still increasing their area of production, and most of the beneficiaries' gardens are now using appropriate agricultural methods. The 3 regions the project was conducted in all have similarities in their climate and geographical profiles, with all of them boasting an array of wetlands, swamps, and arid regions. However, the 3 regions do of course have differences which influenced how the project was conducted. The Kavango West and Kavango East regions have high population density along the Kavango River, with the population being more sparsely inhabited in the inland areas.
So these specific 3 regions, they were selected for 2 reasons. One is based on their poverty level was high in Kavango West, Kavango East, and Zambezi, but also looking at the climate change hotspots. They are high climate hotspots, meaning these communities are mainly affected by the variability and the changes of climate.
The Kavango River, which is the 4th largest river system in southern Africa. It is the only perennial river in Africa that does not flow into an ocean, but instead flows into the Kalahari Desert to form the Okavango Delta. The demo sites in these 2 regions were Salem, Sigone, Ditomboro, Shankara, Siudiva, and Winnie.
The potential that I see in Kavango East region is when it comes to agricultural production. I would like to outline that Kavango East region is one of the regions in Namibia that is doing so well when it comes to agricultural production. Even the farmers themselves, if you go around across the region visiting different farmers, you will see that they are doing so well with their crop production. So CRAVE projects also provided the beneficiaries with drip irrigation systems, of which drippers and the solar water pumps are installed in some gardens, including Salem, as a CRAVE demo plot. In Kavango East, we have got 194 CRAVE beneficiaries. Those are individual farmers. There are some individual gardens, and then there are some community gardens across the region.
For me, I will say the farmers here at Salem, they have a passion for what they are doing. That's what drives them to do even more. Apart from the money that they are making, they are also getting food from here, so that they don't have to buy again from the shops. Salem is known as a cabbage project. If you come to Salem, you find that almost everyone is growing cabbage. Cabbage is being grown here because it's a crop that's demanded by the customers. This project was established 30 years ago, and with the involvement of the farmers who are already now here, I think mostly it was just women from the beginning, and then for now we have 7 males.
Amekwa kara mo Salem, amemnandima gwa mo Salem. Ose kwa kara kwa kara skuni no setu 34 hectares. Omomo 34 hectares iyo twakaramo ba member 42. Iyo twali gaununa bamwe kwa kara no 1 hectare, bamwe iyo bakara no 0.5. CRAVE kwa kuzipandura, CRAVE za tupambatero, kwa tupambatero zo nombuto, kwa tupambatero zo ndarate, kwa tupambatero zo ipombereso, no magarona, no ihupuro, no inike yo kutekeresa. CRAVE simpe gatupa hena isidre imwina natuvura kukuni na nombuto detu, yo hena watupa nonzugo zo natuvura kukuni na oyo imeno yetu ipotu ipungure montanyi natu itura momapia. Pato elisigo, etwagwa nambatero kwa CRAVE, ngoso wa customer betu banaligwederere.
Nandima gomo Salem. Kamchange na goa nandima omomo projects. Kwa kuna mobloka 25 by 40. Ila kumonika ngoso tura konondia. Kukunisa ya udivi kwa ugwananye kwa CRAVE. Mora narenga tuliminye kapisi ngwe mo mtu akulima ngesi. Anapana wiza CRAVE ku tutwara ko madeuro wakaturonga ngape mnatulima, ngape mno kuna, ngape mno turako ruhoho, ngape mno pombera na nyongoso. Awe nare mzangu kwa kere nene kohi. Anapana wiza CRAVE awe mzangu gwa wapa ruhaforo elike. Mora natuvenye kugwana, natuve kutuzigida kukagwana madeuro. Anopenda kumona nyasi mkweni kapia kwisikisamo obeto zinyumba tere.
Amechia pesa no sipata satulie nabo. Asi atoka lihametera muinandima yokutapaika. Yotwakara si ndikwa lihametera mu magrupa twaruwa nangano ba youth adinkantu. Obakaro sindiba kwa lihametera mu nandima. Ekaro sindi kwa lihametera mu komiti ya karo pacheye. Jutwa tura ikari grupa ya tulie nao. Asiri paro litakara nale pa community no sibantu kakara no bia kabe kusuba suba. Sihone na era mtu akara ngoli twe mu grupa ta upa unandima okulima. Mbyo bamwe mbyo bakara si bamwe sidi waruwantanga mukuro kurobera nchui bakawulite mu mukunda ndi batume ku madoropa. Bamwe kwa lima ngabe unandima mu mafuba posi bayangore mahangu bawane mu byokulia. Asimbi bakaro siki apa mukunda pakara ambaraira kewo no kwakara no bibia ukabende kurusuba suba. Asto kali pamwe patare takari kapitwa yapa mukudi tapeka damate ndiwe ni motu tapeka nyanga kapitwa kali no yibi nawa mara wen potu nake ayendera pano sene untantera subura ntapeka damate ndi nyanga na bichia binya yakara munjira yoyi wastu akara no yibi.
When I started working in Mashare in 2017, I meet them as my farmers. Every time I used to come and monitor them and evaluate them. So when they started, they used to do watering with buckets. They used to sell their produce local, and sometimes me as a technician used to help them to market on my WhatsApp group. So when I get customer for them from Rundu or elsewhere, I used to contact them so that they can take their produce to me, and some they sell. Like when they are planting and when they are buying and when they are harvesting and when they are selling, so that we can see if they are making profit or not. The size of the plot where you can plant does not matter.
Kuninga panga tutanga no kukuna and kutundera kukuputura gatukara no kukutu oku wana shere nyoku ninga shituputure and tukune and ngatukono kukonja bene shi kashere nketu ka kutwa wane ka hatufutere haka CRAVE okaka kareshi opata tendre ndarata hacha hatufutereko ene twakone kuninga shi to tuthie ko kamweya tukambeke ku project wetu twathinda ngatukono kuningi tako shi tuputure no kuthima ithiki ene katepo pano ngatukara karo ko kashere niko fochi ngatukono karo kutamo harua ni homo mukunda omungatu kono karo kukuna mbuto zetu thika dodimwa kumona chimundere wetu ne unameni Meero project mukunda wetu ne twaihafira ende twatambura ne project yeshi meero project mukunda wetu ne kuna kumone kashi kukona uyeyuke mukunda wetu no haguva mukunda nikona hawanene mo turuwana sho hakone nao kuwane na maua mpamara pao ya mkuwethera kone kutumira vene kwa CRAVE oyo aturise po na diano shi aturise po mamwe no kenge mukunda thetu mukavango.
Basically, the type of people that we have here is subsistence farmers. Mostly, I would love to say 70% of them are involved in crop production. During this time around, people are preparing for fields, for mahangu. So we are preparing for plowing season, and they plow mahangu and other beans and stuff, cowpeas and stuff. Rainfall is not the same anymore. There's too much climate change variabilities that are happening. So we would like to change the farmers from the traditional way of doing things, which is also costly and also labor intensive. So with the type of technologies that we are introducing to them, for instance, if we say pick like drip irrigation system, this is a very less labor intensive in terms of watering. All you have to do is open the pump, and then the drippers, they do the watering. And I am so glad now to see how the farmers that I've been dealing with, especially our CRAVE beneficiaries, have improved in terms of production and also in terms of income generation. They are happy to be selling. We have linked them to markets.
Ya sansi kasi evangolengele nene kapisa se evangolene unene. Marokwa matupu evu le twambara kulikuli tetagwire. Sanskasi tupuna ya gwanele wangolu de nunu aluhena la kara pupawa pepino mkuro. Ya pandu kompito. Ya tumange de sange unene kwame na nike. Nuwize ni ali meikwa hidi. Kwa dimburu rame meikwa hidi ay zongesefa kupita kana mnanga tulimi epungu. Sanskasi meikwa hidi kuvora tolimi pita kana inangati ndindire komoro kwa gomvura omukuvura ulime zangure ampili ikando itatu mumvura makura pana imwe nyama inike kwa kudigo perange po na papa risilinga karande sere ngombe zange tani karanda water pump kura tani karanda nomuri unye
pobunya ke paro mwa paruka pobunya ya unene ko bantu kwali hamesera unene mokulima komapya kulima mahangu nepungu ano bamwe ya kuwizako mkuro tawakambadala kurovera nukuteka ngozi na intunga ya eparu lyawo imo lya karangoro ngoso ya pobunya ipana akarenye morana pana tundire kwina eganu lyange lyakere momo mtwe ameasatan katotapo wale eparu lya nyama ngetopo kura ipana wizire tania gendi komkuro ni ipana tarere nye po spata sange sanario so sakara ngosopo tan cheka na kunyoku tan cheka miaye okutango ngwendi aye kapsi nawa tango nitameke tupapa ya mpando seli unene kompito CRAVE apagawiza fomuowo kwa kerezwa lyononja makura nayo nyevo ipatangano wakara pobunya ngano ngawakona kubadingura batariasi morale zwa lyononja batariasi ingi awakambadala pobunya tandasi pobunya ya mukambadala namba 1 nyame namba 2 kwa kere mati gumega ninkere ko pepi no staura tupukwina ya makura amesimbe hena simbe momwina turangemo awe kupange mbuto kurugana nainye kachama ya epungu madamate ibatanati no nyanga nanye nyamelike.
The Zambezi region, formerly known as the CRAVE, shares its borders with 3 other countries, Botswana, Zambia and Angola. The Zambezi is the wettest region in Namibia, with high temperatures and heavy rainfall during the rainy season. The Zambezi region consists of swamps, wetlands, woodlands and floodplains.
You would find that apart from this, the bulk of the population has been mainly relying on the natural resources for their livelihoods. So they were not much into a lot of the farming part, but were relying mainly on harvesting the natural resources. For example, you'd look at people earning a living through the rivers, people earning a living through the firewood and timber production. Another thing about the Zambezi region is that the climate is very unique. The temperatures are pretty high. You have very long periods of high temperature, and you have this particular part of the season where you have the rainy period, which is just a couple of months, maybe just 4 to 5 months. But with that, you would find that the farmers then need to take advantage of specific times of the year that they can produce in terms of agriculture. But the general setup of the Zambezi region, you cannot do without irrigation when it comes to most of this crop. You cannot do without mainly things like shade. That's why we are coming in to offer also shade nets for some of the farmers, and then they can be able to have throughout the year production, as opposed to the type of production which is only controlled by the climate.
In Zambezi, we are growing maize, relying on rain-fed. So we have other things like mahangu. So we used to take 2 crops. Sometimes we don't receive a lot of rain, so mahangu will do well. So if we have nice or good rains, then we'll go for maize. So here we are using the Zambezi, which is suitable for the area. With CRAVE, we are very happy. Yeah, we are very happy with the project, since it's here to come and encourage us to produce.
I'm seated on 40 hectares, but it's what I have cleared, it's only 2 hectares. So I'm trying to farm, and I want to focus on tomatoes and the onions, watermelons, but mostly tomatoes, you know, going in that direction. I'm looking at what people eat. You know, they eat tomatoes, you know, it's on a day-to-day. Yeah, I started in 2019. Part of the investment was from our savings. And then, you know, the Environmental Investment Fund through CRAVE, then they gave us the solar pump and then the solar panels. Our biggest challenge was water when we started, because we were using a genset, and the genset we had to buy fuel on a daily basis. We have challenges. Some elephants would come, other small wild animals would come. We have birds, you know. So those are some of the challenges that we have.
I'm a tractor operator for CRAVE project. Yes. Yeah, I feel comfortable and enjoying it, because yes, this is really my hobby. Some they have doubts. They can even ask me some questions. Can you able to do it, or you just want to play with my field, and all those questions. So after I'm done with plowing it, then they will say, "Oh, I'm sorry for underestimating you," and all that. It's very important nowadays, now that we are fighting for 50-50. So even women can do men's work. For me, myself, my career was to do agriculture since I started from pre-primary, secondary school.
Mainly they do the plowing with reapers, because, you know, as you know, the rain of nowadays, the rain patterns are not realistic. So if you use reapers, the furrows contains water. Even if you get little rain, it will contain more water. So they promote conservation agriculture. So at this plot, we are still in the implementation phase. We are not yet, because after 5 years, this plot will be, the implementation phase will be phased out. It will be handed over to the community. Once it's fully implemented, the community will get the knowledge on different, what I will say, on different farming technologies. Because that's why you see we have got our stakeholders like the the agricultural technicians. They are one of our stakeholders. They will give us the know-how.
Progress has been realized on the positive increase in ripped hectareage coverage from 496.6 hectares for 2018-2019 to 1,689 hectares for 2020-2021. An average increase of 8.5% for pearl millet, 69% maize, and 23% for cowpea, 75% kilogram per hectare for 2020 to 2021 has been realized. Provision of quality and drought-resistant or tolerant seeds and ripping services will remain a priority to ensure high yield production while reducing production costs and exposure to high risk of variation in rainfall patterns.
The adoption of the climate smart agriculture, conservation agriculture has gone very well under small scale producers. Largely female producers under trying conditions were producing very well.
I think for me, the best thing to really achieve what we have achieved is the collaborative partnership that we had with the stakeholders, because you cannot implement anything without the involvement of the key stakeholder, because you cannot implement this thing in isolation. We have created markets for it. We have at least introduced this to the farmers. Now they have access to energy, they are energy secure, at the same time they are water secured. The second thing that I feel was key is that ownership of the farmers. For me, ownership is key, because for us to be sustainable in our intervention is to have that farmer having the heart of saying, this is my demonstration site, this is my garden.
The biggest challenge is that the project is financed by a donor that is very young as EIF is. So there's a lot of lessons being learned as we roll out in terms of what we should do, how we should do it, and how we should unfold things on the ground. That is a challenge, but also an opportunity at the same time, because we learn together and we solve problems together with the Green Climate Fund.
I think the main challenge that we had initially was the identification of the demonstration sites. Since if you go around most of the land in Namibia, there is no land that is just on its own. So we needed to really find a strategy to say we need to engage the stakeholders, especially the traditional leaders.
We've also kind of underestimated the power of the traditional authorities in terms of making land available. That surprised us quite a lot. It took us a lot of time before the traditional authorities would avail land that the project required to start the demonstration sites.
There are other challenges related to COVID-19. It delayed the implementation of the project, and those challenges, disrupted the whole momentum of the project.
Again, when you program projects, 5-year projects, you do it as far as practically possible. You define things in the project documents, but when you go out on the ground, the reality is different. So we deal with unforeseen, unanticipated happenings that we resolve as we go along. There are not many challenges. There were delays initially when the project started. In the first year, we lost about 9 months of implementation.
Then the other critical challenge that we also have experienced is the co-financing from government. Looking at the current economic situation, not just in Namibia, but also globally, government had a co-financing of 500,000 to the 9.5 million for GCF as an investment. But as we go on implementing the activities, we have realized that the in-kind contribution had a bit of a shortfall to at least match up with the commitment that government did initially at the signing of the agreement in 2016.
Objective of the project, that is, making sure that food security is achieved at the household level, and that was, achieved and demonstrated from the yields of farmers.
The introduction of the solar-driven water pumping system has been a huge success, in my opinion, because of the environmental benefits, but more fundamentally the recurrent cost that the farmers no longer have to carry because they are not buying petrol and diesel anymore to pump water. That has been a huge relief to the income of certain households.
Issues of climate change cannot be implemented in isolations. It needs a cross-sectoral approach, and it needs, strategic partnerships. Hence, we partnered with the Ministry of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform, the Green Climate Fund, the AMTA, University of Namibia, NAST, Mashare Agricultural Development Centers, supporting line ministry like the Ministry of Mines and Energy, the Ministry of Environment, Tourism and Forestry, the National Planning Commissioner, etc. So without all these partners, this project could have been difficult to implement. We thank all those partners that I just mentioned for supporting the project.
The CRAVE project is one of the first Green Climate Fund investments in Africa, if not the region. Being the Green Climate Fund's first investment was a road of learning and adapting to current conditions. The project has successfully implemented several interventions that lead to the achievement of the project objectives, such as food security at the household level, improved by implementing adaptation option measures such as the provisioning of quality and drought-tolerant seeds, technologies, mechanization services, and knowledge imparted on implementing sustainable cropping practices. The conservation agriculture practices on a 54,000-hectare area and has brought important benefits associated with improved livelihoods of the farmers' social and economic conditions. The project met the fundamental changes objectives by reducing climate vulnerability and increasing the adaptive capacity of 20,656 vulnerable small-scale farmers threatened by climate variability and changes. There was an exceptional adoption of sustainable cropping practices demonstrated by the number of beneficiary households that acquired the abilities to implement and adopt conservation agriculture and climate-resilient agricultural practices. The provision of technologies such as rippers, micro-irrigation systems, solar energy technologies, and knowledge of sustainable cropping practices enhanced the farmers' livelihood and generated sustainable jobs. The farmers' resilience was positively impacted by the improved institutional capacity of extension services, marketing linkages, and business development at regional level.